So,
He's sleeping as well.
My name is Joel.
your name is John.
Joel. J-O-E-L.
Joel.
J-O-E-L.
Okay, so it's not a Islamic name from the looks of it. No?
I think it's a Jewish name.
It's a Jewish. Are you Jew?
No.
So what religion are you?
Sorry?
What religion are you?
Currently no religion.
Do you believe in God?
No God that like...
But do you believe in the originator of the heavens and the earth?
I mean, I don't believe in heaven. And I don't
Do you
think
believe in the originator who originated the reality around you, the planets, the skies, the galaxies, the nebula?
I don't think there was an originator.
So how do you explain the existence and transformation of this material universe?
I don't know.
You might not know, but you must have some explanation of it.
But what I'm saying is, like, all the gods that people believe in right now is the one that I don't agree with. There might be a...
In fact, I would agree with you too. I believe in almost none of those gods.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course there's a distinction.
What is
I believe there is one creator who's created us all, and that's why we call him our God. God is just a word which describes someone who's worthy of our utmost reverence and worship. Okay?
Good, sure.
So, I can understand why there has to be a necessary being who originated this contingent reality. What is your explanation of this contingent reality?
I don't have one.
If you don't have one, then
I'm a mere human being.
on what basis do you reject the originator of this world?
I don't have any clear evidence of, like, I don't know. I'm a mere human being. I'm seeing what people are saying, and you apparently like are saying there is one God that originated all that we see.
Let me put it to you simply. Let me put it to you simply.
No.
Let me work
That's what you said.
Let me work with you.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Do you understand what we mean by nothingness?
Can you explain what you mean by nothingness?
Nothingness is the absence of everything.
Okay.
There's no energy,
Okay.
no gravitational fields, no quantum fields,
Sure.
no matter,
Sure.
not even potentialities.
Sure.
It's simply the absence of everything.
Okay.
So conceptually, now you understand what is nothingness as
Okay.
opposed to something like you and me.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
If you exist now as something,
Yeah.
can there be a time in the past where there was absolute nothingness?
Don't know. Because I exist now, right?
If you do exist now,
Yeah.
could there be a time in the distant past where there was simply absolutely nothing?
I don't know. Was there?
Of course you do know.
Was there?
No, of course you do know.
How do I know?
I will tell you how you know already.
Sure.
So, nothingness we describe is the absence of everything.
Yeah.
No matter, no energy, no fields, no
And
potentialities.
no time, right?
Nothing.
And no time.
Absence
Yeah.
of anything.
Yeah.
So, if there was such nothingness, can anything come out of it?
Don't know. Was there like nothingness ever? Like we don't know.
They gave you a concept of nothing.
It's a concept,
From
right?
that concept,
From your concept, no. From
Right.
your concept, no.
Right.
But we don't know if that concept actually exists.
so what we know then, conceptually,
Yeah.
there cannot be, for our existence of something, that there was an absolute nothingness at one point. It cannot be.
Okay.
Do you follow?
Yeah. Go on.
Good.
Yeah.
That means if something exists now, something always has to exist.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Now you tell me, if something always exists, what explains the transformation which are so orderly, precision engineered, precision engineered order in the universe? How do you explain existence of something with this kind of precision engineering? Let me give you an example, if I can.
No,
I want to give you an example. This is a material object. Even this is a coin, right?
Yeah.
This material object, do you believe that this has self-awareness and consciousness?
No, I don't believe.
Fair enough. So, do you believe this material object also possesses a will, intention, or a volition?
Well, I believe no.
You don't believe it, so? Right. So, can this material object make a camera like this itself, by itself?
No.
Okay.
But I believe. No.
Yeah, it cannot. And the reason why, because this camera is a transformation or and rearrangement of existing matter in a particular combination.
Yeah.
You cannot rationally accept that this material object, without having a self-awareness and the ability, or a will rather, intending to make this camera, it cannot make it. Because these are prerequisites, essential qualities and characteristics. This material universe is material universe matter. Do you believe this material universe is self-aware and also possesses a volition or a will?
I don't know. Could be. I don't know. Like we are self-aware and conscious, right?
If it doesn't,
I mean,
look,
like, no, can I speak, please?
we human beings
Yeah.
are much late in the scene in this material universe.
Still, like we're in
Right?
the scene now.
So life in our universe didn't exist. Not too long ago.
What do you
That's
say?
what scientists say.
What did you
Not
say?
too
I
long.
didn't-
Not
I
too
didn't-
long ago, life wasn't in existence. It was matter, material universe.
But would you say all life has like what humans
I'm talking
are now?
about. My focus is in the material universe. Before life
Sure.
even emerged or
Even we
originated.
are matter. Like what? Like
Never mind.
Are we
So
same
when-
are we same as the camera?
Before life.
Are we same as the camera?
Hear me out. 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 Before life existed in this material universe, it was just matter. How does matter transform in this orderly fashion without being self-aware and without having an intent or a volition? How? I need an explanation which has explanatory scope and power. I don't need something like I believe. It's not sufficient. We need an explanation that has explanatory power or a scope which must make sense. The camera, you would say, I can only accept explanation that this came from someone or something that has the intention to rearrange into this form and had the self-awareness to bring about this rearrangement. This
just
will
one
be.
being
This
or,
will be.
many beings?
Look. This will
Was
be.
it like one person or
You're not
I don't know.
you're not listening.
You're saying like
To
one
bring
person.
this rearrangement of this material object into this form,
Yeah.
you will accept an explanation with a scope of explanation in which there are two conditions met. Whatever or whoever, doesn't matter, whatever brought this into this form must be possessor of self-awareness and volition.
Right.
Two essential characteristics.
Right.
The example I gave you. If you didn't have it, you can't make anything. So can the camera be rearranged in this particular orderly, precision engineered form without
By a coin, right?
without there being a cause which has self-awareness and
Yeah,
an
no,
intention?
No.
Exactly, precisely.
Yeah.
So now tell
Okay.
me, the material universe,
Yeah.
how did the material universe transform in this precision engineered order without the two essential characteristics of self-awareness and will?
Could have a self-awareness.
It's not good. You've already said about the camera.
Yeah,
It
but-
should.
Yeah.
Isn't science like supposedly offering an alternative answer to that? Isn't it
What
saying
is that explanation?
so via chemistry you get self-replicating, and millions of years you get self-replicating molecules?
Why
Right?
can't this camera come by self-replication of chemicals?
It's not science.
Huh?
It's not. It's not.
Why is science now suddenly saying, I have to come back later? Come on. The same science that you now bring about has to explain the rearrangement of this camera, as well as the universe.
But the rearrangement of camera is done by self-aware humans. Right? Right? Right?
This camera,
Yeah.
look, if I said this was not rearranged by human beings, you will accept it?
It'd be hard to be like.
Sorry?
It'd be hard to accept it.
Hang on. Why would it be hard? Why is it not possible for rearrangement of matter by themselves?
Oh,
Bring about like this.
I didn't say by themselves. I'm saying particularly about the camera, right?
No,
And
I
to
can
get-
bring a
wait,
camera
to get,
which you don't know made it. This is Fuji, this is Sony,
Uncle,
but what if?
Uncle, Can I speak too? Like it's a dialogue.
Did you
right?
listen to my point?
Hello, but like, can I speak?
Can you explain what I said so far?
Sure. Like, can the camera be like everything can be rearranged by itself?
Okay, now let me hear your explanation.
Like I'm saying, like it didn't rearrange by itself. The camera.
Can it?
Can it? Don't know. If you give it infinite time, infinite space, infinite.
So
particles,
why couldn't this, given infinite time, make a camera?
Could.
It could.
Give it infinite time and infinite space.
So given infinite time, you can become a potato as well, right?
Sure.
And a frog.
Sure.
What does science say about that?
Infinite possibilities.
What does science say about that?
I don't know.
You don't know. Come on.
Science.
What does science say about given infinite time?
Hold on.
Given a time, can God, a powerful being, exist?
I think you've argued yourself into a hole. though.
Given infinite time, can you have an existence of a being that is eternal, like God?
Can you see that? Sure. If everything is possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
There you go then.
Yeah.
So you
But that doesn't prove you're God, right?
No, you cannot negate that.
That doesn't prove you're God.
now you're saying I will
It's one of the
accept.
possibilities.
Hang on. I will accept that given infinite time, there can be God which is eternal.
Sure.
Right? Explain that. What is eternal? With no beginning. So you're talking about giving infinite time in the future, you can have an
I didn't
existence.
say infinite time to the future.
Everything is possible, you have
I
said.
didn't say infinite time to
Did
the
you not say everything is possible?
future. I did say everything is possible.
Yeah. So
I
why
didn't say it was the thing, right? I didn't say it was to the future.
you did not give any criteria that what is possible, what is not? You did not give any criteria to decide which is possible, which is not.
I want to ask him a simple question. Given infinite time, can everything cease to exist? What about the conservation of energy?
It says it cannot neither be created nor be destroyed.
Cannot be destroyed. And you said, given infinite time, the energy can be destroyed. Which one is it? Which is your position?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not God, man.
No. You need to be consistent.
Sure,
If you're bringing
sure,
in,
yeah.
look at who brought in the support, given infinite time, yes, this can make the camera. You did.
Yeah, I did.
So now, given infinite time, can the energy be destroyed?
Like the law so far is consistent by itself. Like the second law of dynamics, where you're saying.
So that means, given infinite time, there are things that is not possible.
Like you.
No, you are
twisting
telling me
words,
that, not
right?
me. You are telling me that given infinite time, doesn't matter, energy cannot be destroyed. You're not giving me the negatives. What cannot be, given infinite time? That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is, given infinite time, you cannot give me a maths that even everything is possible. Okay? What maths would you bring in here? Everything is possible. Even the impossible is possible.
That's
Given infinite time, can the infinite be finite? And the finite be infinite? Of course not. So we need to know what we're talking about. That's the problem. This is called such a rhetorical escape.
How is this like proving like?
So let's come back to the point.
One God, right?
Let's come back to the point.
These are
now.
like,
Let's come back to the point. I'm saying if there was a material universe, it cannot do any transformation unless it possesses these two essential characteristics.
Criteria.
Yeah? Yeah.
Sure,
One is self-awareness and one is a...
Okay, I can grant you that.
Intent.
Okay. Sure. No. I can grant you that. Like, okay. The universe we see has like a will behind it.
So something that exists eternally, always, and has a will, has a self-awareness.
You still have to like give me an answer to like why there's one.
I'm coming. So now, at least now you realize that there is an eternal existent reality which is self-aware.
Existent reality that is self-aware.
How again?
Remember you said material universe?
Yeah,
Always
I don't know if
existed?
it's eternal.
But you said it cannot come from nothingness. It has to always be there. Without any beginning.
He did say he doesn't know. He's not sure.
Look. Nothingness, if there are two options, there could be for our universe, at one point there was nothing, or there was always something. You cannot have any other option. There's no in between. These are the two binary options. Either the universe is always there, or something that brought the universe always there. Something has to be always there, or at one point there's absolute nothingness. And we discounted the idea that there was absolute
Or the
nothingness.
universe could just come about. Or the universe could just come about, right?
If there was nothing, You can't just come about because you are nothing to come about from.
If suppose there is some kind of nothing which can bring existence, bring things into existence, then that nothing would be something.
I know, I get that point, but how do you get then from, okay, say, if we agree, and again, I think because these are human concepts, I think we're like projecting them
rational
on.
concepts.
But
that's how we understand
everything.
everything.
Categorize in our universe,
absolutely.
rational inference.
Absolutely, but like let's grant it, like if it's impossible that there was nothing and then something came, and so there's always been something, as you said, there's an eternal reality, say, for example, how do we come about to this idea that it's self-aware and it has a will?
That's the explanation I gave.
I'm not convinced by that explanation.
No, what I'm
though.
saying is, if it wasn't self-aware, then transformation that we see would not be possible. For example, I'll give you a simple example. I mean, I think people realize that makes sense. Next time you go to your own home and you sit there in your kitchen and you want to make tea or coffee, but you sit there and you don't intend to do anything, but you have all these material objects. If you don't intend it, would they rearrange and make coffee? It will never happen.
Right.
So you have to have a self-aware or a programmed agent by a self-aware agency which intends to rearrange these material things into what we call tea or coffee. Otherwise, never will happen.
I understand that, but that's the case for when I want to make tea or coffee, me as a person. But why would that apply to this initial cause of the universe? Like, why would that initial cause of the universe?
It should have necessary properties because that is necessary existence.
Right.
That will give rise to it's due to inference and logical inference, rationality. Because something cannot. We have decided that some attributes cannot pop up from nowhere. The necessary being should have some property which will give rise to our consciousness. The consciousness we see in our world.
See, I don't. Why would it have to have this kind of consciousness? Because, sure, it can be necessary, and it can have necessary properties that produce this emergent reality.
So now, there can be multiple attributes of this necessary being, necessary existence. Now, suppose you remove one attribute, then you see that logically, human consciousness does not follow. So we identify that
you remove one of the attributes from the
necessary quality.
Yeah. So how does that affect?
No. So hypothetically, you are calculating. Inferring that what is the necessary quality of the necessary being, which is responsible for phenomena of our consciousness. You can map. You can have one-to-one map, basically, because from necessary being, if everything in existence comes, something cannot emerge out of nowhere. Everything should follow
from that being not be necessary.
No, by definition, it's necessary.
Yeah, exactly. That being always has to be necessary. At no point it cannot not be necessary.
By definition, by definition,
exactly,
it is so.
by definition.
But it is not bound.
It's like attributes we are giving to that cause.
But this necessariness is, so you have identified this necessariness, but you do not know full aspect of this necessary being. You can only infer those aspects of necessary being which is informed us or which is affecting this physical reality. So you cannot say that what will happen to this necessary being or what aspect is there. So this necessary being should have some property which corresponds to human consciousness, and
okay, I think I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, and then this property should be much more than human consciousness. So that's why I say God is all powerful, all seeing, all hearing. Unlike human consciousness, our human consciousness or ability to be aware needs, physical stuff like external organs, But God is not limited to those aspects.
Sure.
But we can rationally identify those aspects. Or if you try to understand this in terms of, simple examples that Brother Mansoor has already given to you, you can infer that in our reality we see there are two types of ability, potential and then kinetic. So potential ability or ability which cannot activate itself. If it is not programmed from external, that is residing within, or it is triggered from outside. That is the nature of potential.
So if it's residing within.
So that should be within necessary beings trigger. Necessary being can will something. So that trigger to potential, that potential to activate that potential of necessary quality, a necessary being, that quality, that trigger should be there, and that trigger is will, conscious will, you know.
Sorry, so I'm not quite sure I got it, because like, okay, there might be a kind of a trigger or a necessary attribute of this eternal reality, say, that produces human consciousness, for example. But the idea that it's a will, that it's a decision that could have not been made if that eternal reality had decided, if we want to use those kinds of words, okay? Which I don't think
more than human. It is not
I know.
like human.
That's why I think
yeah.
that's why I think these words are too small for something that big, right? But how is it that, like, because there's two options from what you say, to my head at least. Either it's true, it has like some sort of free will and it can decide to create this, or by necessity, one of its necessary attributes is that it creates something or this or something that results in this. That is not a will decision, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's where I'm not convinced.
I understand
right now.
your question. So you are saying that whether the free will should be a necessary attribute of that existence or not. It is your question.
Yeah.
Now we see in our nature, I mean, we have two kinds of possibilities of ability: potential and
Kinetic.
Yeah. So potential energy, we see in this contingent reality, this aspect of trigger and activation. You know, and a contingence. Things can be in a particular way, in another way. There are possibilities, you know, and we see that contingency means
This is like within the process.
yeah. This what has followed from that necessary existence.
We don't know if this thing. This thing was carried out from that necessary.
Yeah, because we have agreed that nothing can pop up from elsewhere.
But I think the word being, it's very confusing
Let's
because
address your question, bro. Was that necessary being somehow brought about this transformation of this universe, you know, without a will, but it just happened necessarily, or there was some intention behind, decision behind? The answer is obvious, because our world could have been otherwise. I could have been otherwise. Because when there is something that I could have been otherwise, that means there is a choice involved in how I am. Right?
Consistently.
When there is a choice involved, I am, that automatically tells you a decision choice been made.
So you're saying that because the world could have been
That's
a different way,
Exactly.
It must have had some sort of
My
free
friend.
will, because it must have been able to choose.
That's why the
this
contingency
specific
argument.
More than free will, not free will.
Sure.
That's why the contingency argument is exactly based on that. That we could have been otherwise. And because we could have been otherwise, there has to be an existence which is non-contingent, brought about this contingent reality by choice, by will.
Yes, the contingent reality is not guaranteed to be in this way, but it is guaranteed. It reflects a sign of choice.
I must say, I'm still not convinced, because you say that
Which
it's
part?
meant to be guaranteed. Well, you said a
I think
lot
if
of
we
things.
agreed on necessary existence, then from your sound reasoning, what the attributes these necessary existence
Should have.
possess?
Should have.
Can't have, no?
Yeah.
Or like even...
Yeah.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
should
yeah,
have.
that's a
Not,
good
not
question.
can have. Should
I
have.
have-
Because
I have
we
to
already
think
see
about
the effect.
Yeah.
The effect is here, us. So we want to now understand the cause.
Right.
So when you see a painting, let's
It's
hear
already
it.
concept.
When you see a painting drawn by an artist, you see the art, the product. From the product, you can understand the painter. A lot about the painter.
Sure.
Likewise, when you examine this product, this universe,
Yeah.
you can come to realization of the necessary attributes of the necessary being.
I think that's hard, though, because
There's certain necessary attributes that you can. I'm not saying all of it. You
Sure.
cannot, like being finite
Yeah.
and necessary existence is not finite.
Yeah.
You cannot comprehend it all.
course.
But there are several elements. What we are saying is something that we can grasp, because these
Okay.
are essential necessary attributes.
Even if I can agree with that. And you ask me, what are the attributes? I'd have to think about it again. But off the bat, I would say, an attribute would be something along the lines of having a material property or the ability to generate this material universe
Ability.
in the conditions that we observe it to exist in.
Yeah.
Like,
So no,
that's just, but it's just a
let's-
material claim. It
Let's
doesn't
focus it.
doesn't necessitate
Let's focus it
consciousness.
and narrow it down. So this necessary being must possess ability.
Ability. Okay.
Sure.
And we establish will.
Or like
Ability and
attributes.
consciousness,
Ability or
consciousness,
attributes.
consciousness. So,
If the universe was not in an existence form before, and it came about to an existence form,
Sure.
what does it require? What's attributes?
cause,
What
right?
attributes
It
it
has-
requires behind this transition?
But it has to be able to create universe.
Able,
So without
Consciousness.
intention, or
Intention.
without
But
will,
again, we're granting this thing about nothingness, which I don't think we can know per se. Even though the logic might sound sound, I think it's just like human logic. Like it doesn't
yeah,
necessarily
but
mean
this
that
is
there
the logic.
was or wasn't a nothingness.
you
or
cannot
our
be that
idea
level of
of
base
nothingness.
it is the
this
base.
level of hyperskepticism would lead you to nowhere. There has to be limits to our skepticism, and when things make sense, we don't ask for explanation of the ultimate explanation. Because once you find the ultimate explanation, you don't say what's the explanation of that. You don't go into an infinite regress.
But what is the ultimate explanation? We don't have an ultimate.
And the thing is that it is we are using our limited language.
We've already established
But,
that. It's a necessary
but
being.
what we
How is
should
that an
do
ultimate
is
explanation?
to
If that was
put
ultimate,
or be
nobody would
just in
argue
our
with it, right?
attribute language.
Okay.
Our
Okay.
concepts.
I mean, I'm willing to, and maybe it is too skeptical, but I do think that it's kind of okay to be skeptical about things that are so far removed from us
No,
that
that's
it
being
makes sense
hyperskeptic.
that.
That's being hyperskeptic. Then you have to doubt about your own self as well, whether you exist
That's
or
the
not.
thing. I think it's much easier not to be skeptical about the things that are around us, even though the reasons behind the things that are around us and immediately material might be, you know, really long and
I
go on
would
for
say that it
millions
is
of
not
years.
far. It is not far away from us because we contingent existence are here, right here. So it follows directly. I mean, there is contingent reality. It could have been otherwise. Now it is not otherwise. So it is a direct choice of what?
So
Not
this
necessarily-
idea, this idea that it could have been otherwise, is interesting to me because it's kind
Was
of
it necessary?
sounds
Was
like
like
me
this?
a little bit, like it could be. Like you're in the street and you see a car come by and you look at the back of the car and you read the number plate and it says whatever, and you say, oh my god, what are the chances that that's the number in that plate, like that specific number, like what are the chances? It's such a kind of rare thing, you're like a posteriori, you're like later on, now that we're here, we're saying, oh, but this is so inevitable, this way that we exist in right now, and so there must have been, even though it could have been different, there must have been some sort of decision behind it. But to me that doesn't necessarily follow, like it feels like
It could have been otherwise.
Was it
like-
necessary that it was like that? Was
like
it
even though
necessary?
it could happen otherwise, like for example, how
Okay,
people say
the other option is it was necessary to be like that.
sure.
So basically you're a determinist. Everything was necessary.
Yeah. Now the problem is that let's analyze two options.
Is that a problem? Let's go for
Let's
the
analyze
yeah.
two options. Now, one thing is that in our string theory or physical theories
right.
gives us different types of universe, different laws and
But we
different
don't know,
outcomes.
like just to be clear, like we cannot right
theory.
now.
Yeah, but we can imagine. We can imagine.
Not only that,
But
there
it
is
doesn't
moral-
necessarily have to be true.
There is a moral implication.
I
of
know the moral
determinism.
implication. I know it's
Do
very
you
strong.
punish
Absolutely.
the criminals?
Punishment and merit in determinism obviously stop making a lot of sense. I understand
No,
that.
we need to be very
and
consistent.
there is a
if
moral
you're going to take a
conundrum.
worldview, what I'm saying is, if you're going to take a worldview like determinist, okay, as opposed to contingent and necessary,
Sure.
then in your worldview you need to consistently see the whole world and say no one can be punished for their crimes because everything is determined.
Yeah.
If something happens to you, someone's stolen your Fujifilm camera, you shouldn't call the police and say arrest them.
No.
Now-
He's saying that under a deterministic framework.
I'm saying even in the deterministic framework, you can have.
I mean,
Like justice.
I kind of agree.
The question
but-
now is, in your practical reality, now remember we talked about skepticism before? Now we will establish that actually you're not skeptic. You are actually practical person. Now, if something happens to you, a crime, God forbid, happens. We don't want any crimes, anything wrong happens to you. If something happened, would you just simply say, was all determined, or would you seek justice?
No, I would try to minimize
Right.
the
So you're
effects
no
of the
longer-
crime.
you're no
But
longer
I would
skeptic.
I would have a lot of empathy for the person who committed that crime, in part because
Why
I
would you
would
want them
understand
to be punished?
that
They
the
have nothing
reason-
to do with it. It's
Well,
determined.
I'd probably want the most reasonable punishment. To me, punishment is rehabilitation.
No. Why
So
would you want
those things-
any punishment? Because it had nothing to do with it. Because it's all determined.
But rehabilitation is different, right?
No. Someone, God
Like
forbid,
re-education.
God forbid, not your family, I'm going to take you away. Someone's family,
Yeah.
members, wife, daughters, children, sisters, they were all raped and massacred, butchered, right?
Like,
Family member of that family, do you simply say, who is a determinist, should that determinist simply say, I do have empathy for the individual, but I don't want him to be punished because he had nothing to do with it.
Well, that determinist would probably not say that. But
Right.
because that
So
determinist...
it could be
why
determined,
not?
right? It could
Well,
be
no,
determined how they
because
react.
the thing is, determinism is like a very high concept idea about how material reality works and like the kind of the chain of cause and effect. But the truth is, we as people, we're not like representations, entire representations of all reality. We're representations of people, and as people, we have all these intuitions, feelings.
But it's all
you know.
determined. Come on.
It might be.
It's all determined.
Even if it is all
No,
determined.
in a deterministic model,
Yeah.
everything is determined.
We are
You
arguing
think
determinism.
you have a chemical
Your
reaction of
consciousness,
love?
free
No,
will.
it's all determined.
Absolutely. Well, if we grant that kind of determinism, yes, it's all determined. It just so happens to be that we kind of perceive like we're making individual choices, and so it seems unintuitive. I would say it's not that unintuitive.
So no punishment
but-
should be inflicted on the criminals.
Well, the true determinist would say punishment is the wrong word, because they would say, oh, what that person needs is study and
Why?
intervention
This isn't-
because
everything is determined.
because it's disruptive to society. So here's the thing.
Doesn't matter, it's all determined.
Choice of intervention is not there because it's determined.
It's determined.
You cannot
Not by
do
you.
it. Choice is removed in deterministic
Sure,
world.
sure.
So,
what?
you have to remove this sense of feeling of freedom or not compulsion when choosing things. So you cannot say that we can intervene or something. These words are
Choice
meaningless
is an
now.
illusion.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
In determinism, there's
but
no
I
choice.
think again it goes back to this idea that determinism is something about like a very big cause and effect chain. And when we talk and when we're here, we're engaging between people with like feelings and all these sorts of things. Some people are born slightly differently and are missing some of the average
Are you a determinist?
characteristics. I don't know. I could be.
If you are, then you have to be consistent about it.
Sure.
That means you should say,
Are you
that
feeling?
I don't care if a criminal commits any crime. It's just all predetermined.
But again, I wouldn't say that because
Why not?
because I feel like things like right and wrong and
There
good
is no
and
such thing
bad.
as right and wrong.
I
It's
think,
all determined.
I think they have to do with our
My
feelings.
friends,
Our
there is
feelings.
no such thing as right and wrong.
You're
Everything is
deterministic
determined.
worldview.
There's no choice. You have
I'm
no
not,
choice.
I'm not saying.
There is no
Even your
morality.
sense of
Everything
freedom.
is determined.
But
Your sense
I'm
of
saying
freedom.
I'm saying it's a feeling in a sense.
A feeling of freedom. when
Determined. Your feeling is determined.
Your feeling of freedom is even then determined.
Everything is determined, even
Now,
your
now,
feeling.
now, the issue is the issue is there. Everything, even if everything is determined, you are feeling yourself free.
Yeah.
You know, when deciding or talking
Yeah,
to
you have
people.
this kind of self-awareness
Yeah,
in a sense.
you can name this as a free will. You know,
Sure. Oh, this self-awareness that's
and,
aware
and
of what.
sense of freedom when choosing. You know, feeling of freedom. It is a reality in your. It is aspect of
Some would say it's an illusion.
yours, and it is in this reality. You know, in
Sure.
the deterministic reality.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah.
so if it is deterministic reality and you are having this sense of freedom, and you can term it. Still, you can term it as a free will. You know, your freedom.
Within that framework.
Within
Yeah.
framework. Still,
Yeah.
you can define that.
I-
And if you trace back, I mean, we are not existing, and you trace backward to this existence at beyond certain time,
Sure.
which is not bound by second law, then you will directly follow that sense of freedom and will should be deterministically be there.
Yeah. Should be,
Yeah.
should be
So
determined by that. By
That's
that
why
initial
when
cause.
Yeah.
you reach at this stage, once you've identified these essential qualities, we say, look, fine. Have we found anything in this contingent world? There's a communication from that non-contingent necessary being. And this is where the concept of revelation and scripture comes along.
Uh-huh.
Because we can't comprehend and know the infinite, the necessary, we receive communication from that. And we see that throughout human history. And that's why when we look at the prophets and messengers, when we look at the final of them, and look at the final book, the Quran, we can be sure, our skepticism lays to rest. Why? Because when we examine this book and we then become confirmed that this book indeed is from the necessary being, then all our speculation comes to rest, and now we are totally in line with what we thought was right. Now we know this is right. Because all of that was speculation initially, but our speculation can come in line with...
Until we can come to that point,
so now,
we cannot come to like...
So when we now examine the Quran, when we examine the Quran, we see that even the Quran describes its necessary being, which is in line with what we thought the necessary being should be. There's someone who is one and only and unique and absolute, self-sufficient and independent. The one who is not someone who is born or does produce, offspring or children, and there's one who, nothing like unto this reality. Chapter 112 of the Quran, called chapter of purity, Surah Al-Ikhlas. So now we realize, okay, makes sense. So when you examine it more and more, what other qualities and characteristics of this book is that can tell us about its origin from the necessary being. And that's why the book then gives you all of this falsification test to say, look, if this book wasn't from the necessary being, you can easily falsify it. And one of those falsification tests is about bringing a chapter or a surah, called a surah. There are 114 of them, like the Quran. So the necessary being made the linguistic structure in a particular genre that it is impossible for people to imitate it. Okay? As a hallmark for people to realize that this indeed is the evidence required to accept it.
So how is it impossible for people to imitate it? Sorry?
Yeah, let me give you an analogous situation. Can you see the building over there with the red bricks? Right. Imagine I was the architect, and you're also an engineer, civil engineer, architect, and so on. And many of you are here. And I said, look, you can't make a building like mine. You cannot make anything like my building. And you say, why not? I studied architecture, whatever, I can do that. No problem. It's just a building. But I said, look, my building is unique. It has special feature. If you go and closely inspect it, you will see each brick is not touching with each other. It's like floating in space. That's the whole building is, floating in space. Then I say, look, if you really think that it wasn't the one who made it, it wasn't me, I'm just the one who's saying that made it, make something like it to disprove the claim. You should be able to do so. But once you realize it's not within your capacity and ability to do so, you will say, yep, it is not an ordinary architect that made it.
Right.
The Quran, in its linguistic structure, in the genre, is a composition in such a way that people cannot imitate its genre.
Because other experts have looked at it and say it's impossible to have made
people
this.
have looked into it, Muslims and non-Muslims, for the last 1400 years. Okay, so it's not a new claim. It's a claim that has been there in the mind of people, right? People even tried AI to do it. I tried AI to do it. I helped AI in every way possible. Okay, these are the conditions. Go on, make something like it. Even AI, just about some people saying, the AI is agreeing with you, it can never be made. Ask the AI the next question, do you want to become a Muslim? Seriously. So what I'm saying is even AI, which has no human emotions, was unable to because of the conditions that allowed. Because it's not a subjective criteria. We're talking about a linguistic composition which is objective in its composition and its style.
Okay, what's the best way for you're telling me this? Very interesting. I've never heard of this before. What would be the way for me to encounter this?
Exactly.
Proof,
I'll tell you. So to give you what I mean by that, if I say bring something like this coin, and I don't want to then say, okay, here we go, there's this coin. You will say, it doesn't look like anything like it.
Right.
It needs to be like for a like. Okay, this is what the imitation concept comes in. Okay, make something, imitate something like it. So that means it has to be certain weight, certain shape, and so on. So the Quran, in its chapter, in its surahs, it has a structure within the contents. Okay, how it starts with a nominal sentence or a verbal sentence, whether it starts with a preposition or not, how it's constructed in the form of the linguistic unit, whether it ends with this particular linguistic convention of a grammatical style or not. So you can break it down in terms of grammar and in terms of the context, besides the eloquence part, which could be subjective. Okay, we need to remove as much of subjectivity in our objective assessments. So in fact there is a book available, 2-volume book, and another preamble to it, available by a scholar, Dr. Bassam Sa'i, and who's gone through the full details of what are the likeness of the Quran as the Quran presents itself. Then once you know what the likeness is, what you simply have to do is use that style. And he even showed you the human way of speaking and the Quranic way of speaking. When the Quran breaks it down, you can look like exactly the linguistic modes. Like you say, okay, verb plus this plus, exactly like that. The reason why knowing that linguistic structure, people cannot imitate something like it. What happens if you really want to imitate that kind of linguistic composition?
If someone else have a book,
hear me out.
Hear me out. What happens when someone
Hear me out. Hear me out. Very important.
What happens?
What happens is then that language, when you formulate according to that structure, becomes gobbledygook or meaningless. Because you are supposed to make something like the Quran, which has meaning. So not only the contents, but the meaning. I am not in any way now emphasizing on the eloquence. The Quran is very eloquent, very eloquent. It's a given thing. Everyone accepts it. But I am saying, because eloquence can be subjective, it needs to be there. I have water. It needs to be there. It's a given thing. But it needs to also provide a meaning, as well as the main linguistic composition that it needs to address. Shakespeare has composed sonnets. If I bring a sonnet with 7 words and 25 lines, it's not going to be a sonnet. It doesn't follow that composition of what a sonnet is. So this is where the Quran challenges people to bring something like it. And people have tried it and then realized whatever it comes. Let me give you an example. One example will be sufficient. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. Okay? No bearer can bear the burden of others. It's composed in such a way, so if you say وَلَا تَزِرُ and not, so you have and negative particle, taziru, and a verb form, and the root word jarand is called a thing in English. Okay, that's composition. If you even substitute using the same words, like okay, fine. What are the other synonyms of, say, for example, bearing, like the word hamala in Arabic?
If you substitute them in, it doesn't work.
It doesn't. It becomes laughable. So if you say now, if you put the word hamala in there, it's like no pregnant woman will bear the pregnancy of another, something like this, and it becomes a laughable thing, a meaningless, laughable statement. That's exactly what is the nature of the Quranic challenge.
So that's obviously very impressive, but the idea that might be a proof necessarily that something beyond us.
This is a falsification test. Because if this was a human...
So it's not the proof in itself, this is just a falsification test.
Remember what we said. We want falsification test to make sure that we can exclude that it's not a human invention or a composition and so on and so forth. So once we see that, okay, human beings are capable of composing literature and also imitating it. You know, Shakespeare has been imitated, right?
Yeah, sure.
Writings of Paul has been imitated, even just imitated to Paul in Christianity. People are saying, did Paul write that as a forgery or not?
Oh, right. Yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah, but so is there not such a case in Islam?
In the Quran, this is what we are presenting.
There's no such thing as heretical
text. There is no
text
such thing is where people can match something like it. This is the number one challenge of the Quran, to falsify it.
Okay, but if somebody has a book and they say, can you bring something like this? Does that mean it came from divine inspiration?
If we were to produce, or someone was to produce another book that had the same attribute, that no one could replicate it, and every single one of the sentences in it was completely exactly how it had to be, and you couldn't change a single letter, or else it wouldn't make any sort of sense. If someone were to produce another book, is that the falsification of the Quran? Then, if someone can match that,
if the Quran can be matched, that means the claim that it's from God is false, right? Because the author of this book is claiming that this book cannot be matched because it's divine hallmark in there. So if people can imitate it, that means it wasn't, the claim is false.
We're not saying it can be imitated. We're saying
the Quran says it cannot be imitated.
No, we're not saying imitating Quran. We're saying a human can produce.
That's not,
no. You give an example, right? Like a building with the bricks. We can get to a point where humans can make bricks.
We're not talking about can someone imitate a phone book or something. No. No one's making the claim. Quran is making the specific claim because the Quran is in a particular way composed talking about astronomy, astrophysics, biology, you name it, history, science, anthropology, all of that. So it's specific to that book, it's making such a claim. If it was a book like that, you would expect it to be imitated. Like the other, another falsification test is this. If this book wasn't from God, the Quran says, surely you will find within it many contradictions, many discrepancies and errors.
I mean, that's also a logical
if a book, hear me out, my friend,
Sure.
because you're going by what you've seen on the internet. That's the problem. Hear me out.
going.
Let me put my argument forward. The Quran says this book, not any book. So you're not saying, oh, if you find no mistakes in a phone book, it's from God. No, it's not that. You say this book, which describes the examples I've given you, astrophysics, biology, anthropology, chemistry, but all of it, all of these things. If this book was not from God, we would expect this product to be a product of
non-contradiction.
some human minds or a composition of a collective human minds at that time. We don't expect aliens. I mean, otherwise you can say, oh, I believe there were green aliens that made it. I mean, different story altogether. You can bring in anything. But rational human beings will say, okay, it came from a 7th century time frame. We expect this book produced naturally by a human being or a collection of human beings, or whether the Arabs or the people outside Arabia and so on. That's what we expect. Now, we also know the limitations of people at that time. They didn't know everything about what we know today about the uncertainty principle, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. I'm sure they didn't know that. Things about how to make a camera like that.
How do you know that? Like God could
Did they know how to make a camera?
I don't know.
Yeah, of
I
course
don't
you
know.
don't know. That's the
I
thing.
don't know.
We don't speak to people who know. I don't know.
No. I'm asking, brother.
Bad thing to say.
No.
Brother.
No. I don't know.
Brother.
I'm speaking to a distant.
I'm speaking to you.
You can come to your place.
Okay. You cannot put me in
Come to your place over there.
I'm speaking
Come to your place.
I'm speaking.
We can have your question. I mean, be patient.
We will have you to act like that.
Okay, Joe. When you say you don't know, I say it's the wrong answer. Because
I don't know. If I don't
It's the
know,
wrong
I can
answer.
say I don't know.
look,
No?
in an exam, if you say I don't know, it's not the right answer.
It's not an answer.
It's
If
a wrong
you don't
answer.
know,
But it's not an answer.
uncle, if you don't know.
But
It's
even
not
in
an
the
answer.
conversation, it's not a correct answer. Okay? It's simply basically saying I don't know the right answer. So what we say is this: if people had the technology to make satellites and cameras like this at that time, we should at least see some remnants. That's what the history of the human history is all about.
Uncle, what I was trying to say.
The fact that we don't see anything like this, we have reasons to believe and accept they didn't have that technology. In fact, there's nothing there from them. That's why we are saying we're being genuinely real people when we examine history. We are not going to be a skeptic and say, you know what, of course they had the technology to split an atom and make, a test tube,
I didn't say that.
nuclear fission in a test tube. They
Uncle,
have
I
that.
didn't say that. I'm saying.
I am saying that.
No, did they,
I am saying that. They did have it.
You say they did have it.
I am saying that.
Okay.
Because based on you,
Okay,
why
you
not?
said-
Come on, I can say anything.
Okay, yeah.
But now you see how silly it
Okay,
is.
did they communicate with God back then?
Let's come back to my point.
Okay, but now he's not
the
talking
point-
to me.
I think he's gonna get-
I'm
he's gonna get
establishing my
I don't know.
argument.
Like,
You need to
if they
look at my
can
argument.
If they can communicate with God, and if God can,
You
like,
need to deal
think
with my
about,
argument.
like,
So my argument is this.
Yeah, I'm not
So the
talking.
Quran challenges people back then. Look, if it wasn't from God, these are the two falsification tests. There's many. Let's restrict it to two. These are the two falsification tests. You should be able to falsify it. So people were smart then as people are smart today. Don't just see you're smarter than them. Right? Right?
I said I
Good.
didn't
So
know.
these smart people then they were unable to falsify it. Okay? Fine. Fast forward today. There are smart people today. Why are the smart people unable to falsify it? That means there is something there within this falsification test that people are unable to meet the challenge. Okay? So this is something that we were saying, be a rational human being and ask yourself, why is it impossible to meet the challenge? Because the challenge seems fair. Bring something like it, find a contradiction, because a product in the 7th century, we expect them to make mistakes in science, about history, about many things. But the fact that it somehow filters away the mistake and brings something which is true what we know today. For example, it talks about that the universe is expanding. expanding. At that time, people didn't believe the universe expanding. Greeks believed it was the science of the day. If you don't believe in that, like, you must be really out of your mind. This is what science is. Static universe. The universe it is. But the Quran kept saying, no, this is not the case. Okay? Universe is expanding. But the Quran doesn't stop there. It says it will be rolled back like a scroll. Science doesn't say that yet, but it's still postulating.
It has been
Yes.
suggested.
Exactly, it has been suggested now. Correct. But that's what the Quran is saying. So whatever has been established, that we know that the Quran is saying something that is extraordinary. When the Quran describes so many different other things, and we realize it could have got it wrong, but it doesn't. And when the wrong thing was there in the community, and the Quran somehow filtered it out, you need to ask yourself, how so? That is what gives us the credence, the credibility of this book, that I cannot explain it otherwise at all rationally.
Right.
So I have to now make some explanation to justify what this book, where it's come from.
Right.
And the only...
Even it is unmatched in terms of the books in the world which have effects on civilization. I mean, Quran is the book that has enormous effect on civilization. I mean, the modern civilization is based on, you can say, that Quran itself. I mean, science is influenced by,
scientific method itself.
Scientific itself is devised by Muslims who are inspired by Quran. I mean, so now another aspect is that it is
From
the
7th
only
century,
book that is,
right?
memorized by thousands of people, unlike no other book, unlike all other books. And another aspect is that so
Are you listening? Are you
yeah,
listening?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you're saying
You
put it
guys are
once.
not listening to us.
So no,
So did you let me speak though?
Let him finish the sentence.
Oh, now you're going to make this excuse I didn't let you speak.
now it
Let
is,
him
Excuse.
finish. Let him
Like I'm asking for
not only
excuse.
its composition on or the content. I mean, in terms of its effects on human society or civilization, and the memorization, how it affects hearts and minds. This thousands of people has memorized full Quran. No other book is in a such form that it can be memorized so easily. Or so
Have you memorized it? Have you
Let me give you a
memorized
simple example.
I have
Describe
some
me a
questions.
mountain.
it? Hold it.
Me, it looks like
I'm
a
not
triangle from far away, but it's more like a cone.
But it's like the memorization is like a problem.
Good enough. But did you know that most mountains have underground roots?
I did, oh, no, actually, yeah, I did.
Yeah,
that,
you knew that because you studied in geography.
Sure.
But when you go to a mountainous area, you can't visually see it's going there. You're not going to start digging and say, mountains have roots. The Quran describes mountains like autad. When you go in camping and you put a peg, most of the peg is underground and then a little bit at the top. The Quran describes mountains like that. Most of it is underground. So look, how the Quran describes a natural phenomenon like a mountain. Common sense tells us people who are just making from themselves will describe the way you did, an elevation of the ground.
Right.
But when it describes the elevation is much bigger than the elevation, you would have to ask, how does someone know that in that time period?
But surely is that peg example, is that specific about the elevation? Like, does it
Peg example is for the mountains.
Because like you could, to my eyes, the way you've told it at least, it feels like you're picking the interpretation of that peg example that points at the elevation or like
Mountains are described to be like pegs.
right, but they're not. Right, you don't bring them from the top and bring them down.
What is
They
the
come up
description?
from the collision between two tectonic plates.
Why so? Because a peg describes, look, the Quran 1400 years ago is not going to describe about, that, this is something called oxygen, this is called hydrogen. It will describe things in a manner that is understood by people then and today. It's not going to use scientific words like thermodynamics. They'll say, what are you talking about?
It's going to use like common nomenclature to explain.
Exactly. So when it describes natural phenomena, it describes things that people can see.
But the examples are precise. The examples, the wordings, it can be understood by layman people, and even if most knowledgeable people take that words and try to match how much it matches with the current scientific or established observed facts or not. They can easily, recognize the marvelous aspect of choosing those words. Even if for public speech it is being used, these words, but the words are so carefully chosen that it can be understood by multiple layers of knowledge. Yeah, generation.
I mean,
Yes.
that's obviously very impressive, but
I want to give you another example. Again, something that is in everyday occurrence. Chapter Surah 22, verse 73. So this is what it says. يا أيها الناس ضرب مثل فاستمعوا له. Oh humanity, a lesson is set forth, so listen to it carefully. Who is it addressing? Muslims?
humanity.
Humanity. Listen to it carefully then. إن الذين تدعون من دون الله لن يخلقوا ذبابا ولو اجتمعوا له. Those idols people invoke besides God, Allah, can never create so much as even a fly. وَيَسْلُبْهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْ ضَعْفَ الطَّالِبُ وَالْمَطْلُوبُ. Even if they all came together for that, they cannot create. And if the fly were to snatch anything away from them, they cannot even retrieve it from the fly. How powerless are those who invoke and those invoked. It's an example reminding people not to associate partners with God. Some people say, oh, there's something else with God and so on. But this example is demonstrated with an analogy of how the weak are those deities people invoke. And how is this weakness demonstrated? By a fly. What's so special about the fly? The author of this book is saying, look, you can't create a fly. We can't do it even today. Even if the fly were to snatch something away, you can't even retrieve it. Now, do you know how the fly snatches things and consumes it and eats it?
No, tell me.
Okay. The fly has a tongue called the proboscis. Okay? The way it sees the food, spits the digestive enzymes on the food before it has taken it. The food is being digested and then it retrieves it. So, when it takes in, the food is no longer your normal food. The egg is already fried, my friend. Can you unfry the egg anymore? You can't, because the food is already taken. So you can't retrieve the food back from it. Now, you might say, this is amazing. We knew this today because of the proboscis that we've examined the fly under a microscope. We've examined the food.
But you're saying that there's an implication here that they need.
I'm saying,
that
did
fact.
people know these kind of things?
Scientific miracle, by the way.
No, I'm not saying it's a miracle, brother. No. Don't put words in my mouth.
No.
Jazakallah khair. No, I'm saying, no, I don't want to make that claim. No, brother.
Not regenerated.
Please. I am not making a claim of miracles, right? Because you're complicating things, brother. Do not complicate things. I'm saying this is something interesting, okay? Interesting, okay? This interesting thing is, do you expect people to have known this? And how would have they known this? Because we have no, again, human documentation of making a camera or knowing about the fly and so on and so forth. We see absence of this kind of knowledge throughout human history. So when you build a cumulative case, we've given you two examples. We can carry on. I don't think it's necessary. When you have examples after examples after examples, one then needs to do what? Make an assessment. How can such a book be a product of a human mind or a collection of human mind?
I mean, I must say, like, even though it's interesting, this example, like, even just reading it off your phone as well, like, it's not, I could grant that it might be that very subtly in that text, it's being implied this reality of the biology of a fly, but I think it's very, very subtle and very much hidden under the more common interpretation of, like, it's a this. I mean, this whole thing is reminding me of, like, if you go on the internet and you go on, like, Rap Genius, and you read a bunch of rap lyrics, and you see people analyzing those lyrics.
What have I added to it that is not there?
So that idea of those gods that those people believe in.
About the fly. Just
about
about
the
the
fly.
fly.
Yeah.
What have I added that it wasn't already there in the text?
This text says, right, those gods that those people believe in.
No, this is an analogy about the weaknesses.
Right, but
By analogies given,
they wouldn't even be able to retrieve whatever.
No,
the
not
fly
the
has
gods
stolen.
retrieving it. No,
Is it not?
it's not about gods. Let me tell you.
Bring it up.
It's not about gods retrieving. Look,
About deities.
no.
Listen for these idols you invoke beside Allah can never be created so much as a fly. so much as a fly, even if they all were to come together for that, and if a fly were to snatch anything away from them, the idols, right? And if the snatch were to snatch anything away from them, they cannot even retrieve it from the fly. So the idols cannot retrieve whatever is like this. The fly can steal from the idols, and those idols cannot even retrieve what is being stolen by the fly. To me, that's more obviously the point that is being made. It's like a diss at those idols more than a subtle scientific point about a fly.
People are
and its biology.
invoking like Christ or human beings elsewhere to create. The example here encompasses all of those people who are invoked as deities. Okay, even if you invoke a scientist, same thing. Scientists can create a fly, whatever. The example of what the fly is doing is the precise point in the analogy. The fly snatches something, you cannot retrieve it. That's how the weakness is given. Because a fly is like nothing. It's a weak thing, right? Fly. People just... That fly does retrieve things which is unretrievable. That's the point.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge from God.
That's the point.
If any scientist can prove that this is wrong,
Thank you.
then there will be a question mark on
I
that.
hope we can have a
So
discussion.
it's a kind
later
of
on.
challenge.
Maybe.
It's a challenge.
I mean, it's interesting, but again, I think it's
No,
this
so
example
now-
is very subtle.
Look, this example, I have not added something that is like, it's not there. I'm saying it talks about retrieval. It says fly retrieves. How does the fly snatch things? This is how it does.
Yeah.
So we understand the mechanism now.
Yeah.
So what I've done, I've just shown you from science what the mechanism of snatching and retrieving is. That's all.
For a fly.
Yeah. And now we realize this is something like, wow, how do we expect people to have known of this before? Like the mountain and this. I mean, the example I'm illustrating to you, it has a lot of significance to say, how is it possible for someone to have known these kind of things?
That's the thing, though. I don't think it's obvious at all from that example that they knew how the fly biology worked.
No, they didn't know. We now know.
Sure.
That's my point.
But
They didn't know. The author has said this because it's God.
But that
the
text,
people,
I mean,
the
sorry.
people may not have even understood that at all. For them, a fly is something so weak, and the gods that people invoke are also weak. But the mechanism of that weakness is now appreciated and understood better today with our advancements of science.
Sure, but it's not. Again, it's not obvious to me that that text is implying anything specific about the fly. I think it's just using it to remove credit and credibility from these other idols.
Why would someone bring an example of a fly to show the weakness? So that means the analogy that's been brought, we need to understand the analogy.
Sure.
And the understanding of analogy is that thing. This is
Well, presumably a fly is weak for us.
no,
comparatively.
it's snatching and retrieving. Why are you ignoring that part? Because that's the focus of it. The fly, even if it were to snatch something, they would not be able to retrieve it. It's the snatching and retrieving.
Because when a fly consumes or snatches something, it first poisons it in a way, and then takes
Do you
it away.
know?
So even if it poisoned it,
look,
you wouldn't be able to
if you
retrieve it.
didn't, if you didn't know, this is how the mechanism is. Now you would say, okay, fine, I can catch a fly too, with a fly catcher. People do. Flies being on the food, you can catch the fly, and then say, okay, I can then retrieve the food. But the problem is, you can't retrieve
the
it.
food because the food is poisoned in a way.
Food is already digested,
Sure.
eaten away.
Sure, but again, like, why is it so hard to believe that they might have had an intuition, even in the year 700,
When you say-
that this is a reality?
Very
Because
good.
they live with flies, they see that the food can spoil. I don't know, it's not
Yeah.
so obvious. No?
What's the intuition? If you're living in a desert and you say, everything is made of water. Every living thing, is made of water. You are in a desert, there's hardly any water, and you say every living thing is made from water. Your intuition will tell you otherwise, but the Quran says no. Every living thing is made of water. It's made from water. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ.
I see what you mean. So you think it's...
Goes against intuition.
It goes against intuition. But again, that's not obvious to me at all, because even though these people might live in the desert and there's not a lot of water around, I'm sure they know that if you cut one of those open, there's a lot of liquid that comes out. For example, there might have been, there's a lot of reasons why they might associate people with water.
What about the minutest microorganisms like a bacteria or something like this living under a dead volcano or under the depth of the deepest oceans. Of course, people in the desert haven't been none of these two places. To say that every living thing is made of water is a very much overstatement when you don't even know any of that thing. But the fact that we now know this is the case, it tells you why did someone have that confidence to make such a statement?
Well, it might have just been overconfidence and they got it right? Like
now,
there's a legitimate.
Okay, so now we come to another point. Someone's intuition and overconfidence brought about all those things. There's a limit to that, even by science.
Sure.
Right? Science of probability tells us if you have 20 situations and you want to get all of them right, it's 1 in a million. One chance of getting it right and a million chance of getting it wrong.
Sure.
Quran has more than 20. So now you have millions of chances to getting it wrong and one chance of getting it right, and the Quran gets it right. It's not due to chance.
You don't think it can't be due to chance, you say?
Because the chance of probability, the science of probability will tell you it's unlikely, highly unlikely. Because if you have 20 examples, look, I gave you two, I can give you 20, no problem, right?
Sure. So just, and I'm sorry because I have to go now.
I have to go too as well.
But you're saying that there's no, is there like no wrong statement or no like scientifically wrong statement in the Quran?
Quran does not go with established reality because it comes from the one who made this reality. Okay? At that point when people thought the earth was, not the earth, the universe was static, Quran went against it. They could have argued, oh, the Quran is unscientific. They could have. But what we're saying is, even today people argue something, but when something is established without a shadow of doubt, then the Quran, you will see, doesn't go against this reality. Okay. Because the Quran is from the...
So even if there's something that right now we might say this is...
established reality, but if something is which is controversial or but it's like not really established, then of course you can't use that to judge against the Quran, right? For example, the Quran talks about the beginning of the heavens and the earth. We have not got the technology to understand what was there exactly at the point of creation. We're speculating with our mathematical models and observation of the effects of the cosmic background, radiation, and so on and so forth. We're projecting. But this is, again, not 100% science. So we have to now talk about what is, for example, we have actually gone outside the earth and observed whether the earth is like a sphere or not. So no longer anyone believes the earth is flat is tenable because we've moved out the earth. This is kind of things we're talking about. Okay, my friend, nice talking to you. What's your name?
Paulo.
Nice meeting you. You take care. We have a channel called Dawah Wise. Can you see the button?
Yeah. Dawah Wise.
Do watch and you will see a lot of this.